You're listening to Behind the Lines, a podcast presented by inplayLIVE and powered by Pinnacle, the #1 sportsbook where winners play and never get limited. Go to pinnacle.com/inplayLIVE to sign up and get in the game.
Give me the Rams at 40-1. Fuck yeah. Like I'm pumped for that bet. And of course, every year we talk about something like this, and then we're going to be sitting here going, "Oh, the Vikings got got through." Right?
Yeah, they just get blown out.
Be like, I told you so, guys.
All right, hello and welcome to Behind the Lines, the very first episode of 2025. We are coming into the year powered by Pinnacle, here to purify the sports betting industry. I'm your host, Shane Mercer, as always, joined by Andrew Pace, the founder of inplayLIVE, a community of like-minded sports bettors dedicated to long-term success. We've got the great Gosu, John Wilson, joining us off the top to ring in the new year with us here as we kick off our first episode of 2025. On today's show, DK's subscription service. It's Black Monday in the NFL, and it is playoffs, baby. The gridiron grind coming at you in just a little bit. But guys, first, I do want to kick off our show here with this piece of news coming from DraftKings that I think is kind of interesting. It's changing the game a little bit in the sports betting landscape. We'll see how it plays out over the long term. Right now, it's just a trial. But let me give everybody out there the details. All right. DraftKings has launched a trial run of a subscription service. It's only available in New York at the moment. It's called DraftKings Sportsbook Plus. So you can pay $20 a month to have unlimited parlay boosts. So these parlay boosts, how it works, it's a 10% boost for 2 legs. And as you add legs, it goes up and up and up. The boost increases all the way to 100% once you get to an 11-leg parlay. DK says it was designed to offer customers an enhanced fan experience, creating more excitement and value to our extensive parlay offering. Anybody out there who's used DraftKings already has seen this before with the profit boost for parlays, but now basically you can pay $20 a month to have that perk available unlimited. You can do it all the time. What do you guys think of this idea of a sportsbook having a subscription service?
I guess I have just so many questions. I mean, I think this is the first I've heard about it. To me, it's like the idea that it's a flat fee is interesting, because if you're like a $20 bettor, you're basically paying 1 unit to have a chance to win however many more units. But if you're like a $1,000 bettor paying $20 to be able to boost like bets that you think you have an edge on, seems like an insane proposition. And I just wonder how, who, and also who is going to pay for it? It's gonna be the people who have the ability to bet thousands of dollars probably over the person who's betting $20 at a time, right? They're more likely to do something like that. So I don't know. Seems like a bad move for DraftKings, I guess, but they're just trying to make people bet more parlays. But I don't know. It seems like really high volume, high dollar sharp bettors could get a lot of free money off them in this way.
Well, Shane, do they allow same game parlays as a leg?
Yes, they do. They typically will allow the same game parlay. Oftentimes, the same game parlay could be considered 1 leg, though. So sometimes they do. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm not boosting a same game parlay 100% if I put 11.
Oh no! If you did 1 same game parlay and you put 11 legs from the same game on it, I think that would count.
That can't be the case, the edge would just be tremendous to the people that know what they're doing.
That's a good question. Do they allow it for the same game, like 11 legs on the same game? I'm not 100% sure, but yeah.
Right. I would have to assume no. If the answer to that is yes, like there's already teams out there doing this, they're just going to be like, oh my God. Now it's interesting. So there's the business side of things where you go, okay, DraftKings still hasn't basically they have turned a profitable quarter, but they're not like a profitable company right now when you look at their stock. So they're trying to find creative new ways to obviously encourage parlays while boosting revenue. And then they look at their edge and how much they're making in that area, and they go, oh, we can boost these bets. And obviously that we can still turn a profit based on our numbers. But I think this opens the door to a whole different type of bettor coming in and taking advantage, right? So like there'll be some pretty prominent and long-standing offshores that won't even allow you to parlay pregame tennis. Like it doesn't work on their site. It says these types of events cannot be combined. And the reason for it is because in major tennis, as we actually head into the Australian Open here, major tennis tournaments data on favorites once you go to that fifth set actually creates a theoretical edge on some of these crazy ass big favorites, number one, but those edges compound with parlays. So when you take some of these boosts from these sports books that do offer them for tennis, it can be a really great way to make profit from these books. So they are going to attract a parlay customer that they don't even know exists because they haven't exposed themselves to that type of risk yet doing this. So this could hurt them a little bit. Now, the other side of it is, can I, as a sharp player, look square by subscribing to this thing? And how, like, since it's a trial for them, how long does my leash grow being that player in their ecosystem? I think there's a player that's going to hit them really hard with this. And I don't mean one. I mean, there's a type of player that's really going to come in and do well with this subscription. And if I was in New York, I would be exploring this and looking at as many angles as I possibly could. And if I'm not in New York, you could talk to the people that are and work with them potentially on how you can exploit this. Now, I think fundamentally speaking, we're going to go, 11-leg parlay. It's a sucker's bet. That not always, right? Those edges can compound, and there's ways to scrape money here. One of the things we've talked about quite a bit this season is teasers, right? There's a time and a place for those things, and there's a time and a place for even favorites in the NFL. If you're getting a 100% boost in certain circumstances. Shane, you've strung some games together this season.
I might have strung a few together. Yeah. Yeah, I do have to mention something though that maybe is getting missed here that I didn't outline right off the top in all the details there, is that each leg can't be shorter odds than minus 500. So just something that, I do think you're absolutely right that there's probably a way to take advantage of it, but that is a caveat in there. So you can't go, you can't have a minus 1,000 favorite in that parlay.
Well, you could. It just that leg wouldn't.
No, it wouldn't provide the boost. Yeah, you wouldn't get the added boost because of it.
Well, you know what though? I think it brings up potentially a bigger discussion, and that is membership tiers with sports books potentially being something that could be uncovered down the road. Do some people pay for them? Do some people get them through a VIP status where the membership is comped? Just that whole avenue. We've obviously talked quite a bit on this podcast, especially last year, about bet vision and how you're able to watch the game when you've placed a bet or you have money in your account. Do memberships start, having access to that in some capacity? I know for me personally, I'll use BetVictor or Bet365 to watch NFL with BetVision. Right. If you were to have, let's be honest, those are limited accounts that I'm using to watch the games. But if they said, hey, there's a membership that allows you to access the games through their site where, you don't have to bet on the game or whatever, I would obviously be a subscriber to that. I know, John, you would too, because you're always going through your limited accounts and going like, what am I betting $1?
Betting $1,
yeah. Yeah, to watch this game, right? So, that just brings up a whole other discussion and potential revenue model. Now, I have no understanding of this. But when it comes to TV rights, like there's a reason why we watch Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. Why is it that BetVision has like the betting rights for being able to produce the games, and us to be able to watch them. And you can watch the NHL on Bet365 in China, but you can't watch the NHL on Bet365 in Canada, but you can watch European hockey, right? So like how all of the broadcasting fits into this, and if betting is, I don't want to say a loophole, but an area where you go, okay, there are rights that allow for us to watch the games through their platform. Could that become a membership model? And God, I would be at the front of the line.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the long term, because, you know, legacy broadcast is slowly fading away and dying. We know this, you know, everybody talks about it all the time, but it is sort of hanging on and clasping to the rights that they do have. Because I know, like for myself, I have I've got the NBA. I forget what they call it, but what the actual league calls it, right? That allows you to watch League Pass. Thank you. So I've got NBA League Pass, and I know when I go to use NBA League Pass, if the game is actually on TV, like on TSN here in Canada or Sportsnet, I can't watch it on League Pass. You know, I've got to watch it on the legacy broadcast channel, and so. You know, I think over this is just me sort of hypothesizing, but I think over time, the legacy broadcasters are slowly probably going to end up either being forced to relinquish those rights or lose those rights to streamers, like we're sort of starting to see. And yeah, it'll sort of be interesting to see how the sports books can kind of capitalize on that, and perhaps, you know, Pace, like you're suggesting, offer membership, you know, fees, you know, to be able to watch those games, and maybe you pay to belong to the sports book, in addition to betting at the sports book, like what DraftKings is sort of trialing here. And when it comes to taking advantage of it, though, Pace, and, you know, them sort of exposing themselves, I just think that their algorithms are only getting better and better at identifying those sharp players, and they'll just boot them. You know, you go in there, right. You win a couple of you know 100% boosted parlays where you did compound the edge. You know, they're gonna catch on to that pretty quickly, and you're gonna get shown the door real fast, I think.
But I agree with you, but I think there might be a little window here that if you're in New York, you could really take advantage
absolutely
of it.
During this trial run. 100%. Because, you know, they want to promote it. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. It'll be interesting to see if other sports books do follow suit, where they start offering, you know, some kind of paid subscription service, and whether that means you're accessing boosts or other perks or inducements, or, you know, you're doing it to you know, be able to watch games. It'll be interesting to see, but I definitely think that this is going to sort of open the door to that kind of experimentation from other books out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is kind of cool, but at the same time, I guess we'll see how it plays out. All right, guys. Moving on into sort of the big news in the sports betting world, because of course the sports betting world, at least here in North America, is very much dominated by the NFL, and that's a big reason why we do the gridiron grind, and we are going to get to that in a little bit. But first, guys, we are recording this on what is known as Black Monday, the day that NFL coaches lose their jobs, and for many out there, it also presents opportunity to perhaps slide into a role. So I'll break down what we know so far, and of course by Wednesday when this episode comes out, I'm sure some of this will be dated, or things will have changed, or more people will have lost their jobs, or some people might get hired. But here's what we know so far. Doug Peterson is out as the Jacksonville Jaguars head coach. They have let him go. Jared Mayo is out in New England. They let him go on Sunday after they beat the Bills. The Patriots beating the Bills in a bit of an upset, even though the Bills didn't play their starters for the most part. We also know that the New York Jets do not intend to continue with Jeff Ulbrich, who has been the interim head coach after they fired Robert Saleh mid-season. The Jets are actively interviewing. I've seen Rex Ryan's name at the top of the list for the coaches that they're pursuing, which would be interesting, a little sort of a blast from the past there. The New Orleans Saints need to find a coach. They're also, they ditched their coach, Dennis Allen, midseason as well. Darren Rizzi took over, but they're looking for someone else. So he's not going to be there to stay. I saw a name thrown around, Stanford's head coach, David Shaw, that the Saints are possibly looking at. Perhaps that name means something to you, John. I don't know much about the guy at all. The Chicago Bears got rid of Matt Eberflus midseason after a terrible debacle that we talked about here on this podcast. So they're looking for a replacement. The Seahawks, they fired offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. The Bengals fired their defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. And a couple of other head coach names on the chopping block that I've seen sort of put out there, like maybe they could lose their jobs. Mike McCarthy at the Dallas Cowboys and Antonio Pierce with the Las Vegas Raiders. All right, guys. What do we think? John, I'm going to turn it over to you first here. What do you think on some of these moves, things shaking out? What do you think we should be paying most attention to in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything really surprising with some of these firings. I think a lot of those, if people were questioning whether Doug would have even made it back from London, a couple months ago, right? So I think we were actually kind of surprised that he lasted this long. The Mayo firing, I think everybody kind of been talking about that for a while. I think it seemed kind of obvious that was going to end up happening. Wondering if Vrabel talking to the Jets is really just a play to scare Kraft into hiring him for that job, even though he passed on him last year. So that's like the first thing I thought of there, is even when he was interviewing with the Jets, I thought maybe that's what his goal was. So I guess I'm not really shocked by any of those things. I would just like to see more players, coaches, and like football guys being head coaches again. I think the whole whiz kid, like OC guy that's become a head coach, like Mike McDaniel, like I think that stuff just kind of run its course. There's McVay is just kind of a different animal from that group, and so is Shanahan. Shanahan's been around football his whole life with his dad, right? Hall of Fame coach. So I think those guys are kind of different. Whereas we have a sour relationship with LaFleur in our group up in Green Bay from that same tree. Just kind of tired of those guys. Would like to see a lot of those guys move on, and let's just go back to football guys that make football decisions during a game, like punting the football on 4th and 5 from the 50, and like all that stuff. Like I want more predictability back in the league. I find myself every Sunday saying, well, I just don't think I can bet this game, or I just don't think this game it has to be a stay away. I'd like to get more games back that I feel confident betting and knowing what decisions are going to get made. So that's kind of the angle I'm looking forward to, and seeing who these next head coaches are going to be.
Well, I think you brought something up there kind of in the discussion, and we've just come off of this incentives week.
Yeah.
And the incentives are like the discussion of incentives and these they have to win and they have to lose type things are so rampant in the betting space. It's almost a little bit toxic. Like it's like, guys, it's a football game where, like, number one, anything can happen. And number two, because of this sort of incentive or whatever it is, the narrative doesn't mean that it's going to happen. So, like, it's a really good thing to put in your back pocket as you head into week 17 and week 18 next year and for the rest of your life. Do I want to know about those incentives? There was part of me last week where I was like, if someone fucking brings up another incentive, I swear to God, I don't want to even know or hear about it anymore, because it's become the entire basis and rationale for expected value. Nothing else goes into the discussion. Like talking about the Bucks with Mike Evans, which, by the way, is the best evidence of how they actually do care and the incentives do matter and that there is validity to potentially having value behind them. That being the single greatest sort of evidence of it. He didn't cover his pregame yards, yet everyone in the world was on that bet because of the incentive. And they, instead of kneeling out, they gave him the ball. But this is the point. That was like probably the most bet or biggest example from this previous week. And they needed to win the game above everything. If they're in a situation where they can get him his incentive, they will. But that is secondary to making the playoffs, right? So there's a lot of sort of narratives that float around. This is now year after year after year. This is not just one circumstance. We've seen it with 3 separate teams in this season alone, where they won a football game to lose the first overall pick, and people think that they cannot win the game. And it's not like I'm pulling a rabbit out of a hat. There's 3 examples this year. There's multiple from previous seasons as well. So a lot of this stuff in these narratives, I think, actually go hand in hand with the coaching discussion, because John, you mentioned it. It's like Mayo's getting fired. So don't be surprised if the Patriots actually go try and win. He doesn't really owe them anything. He's not trying to get them the first overall pick. And then there's also potentially the logic that the Bills didn't want to give the Patriots the first overall pick. You could kind of see at the end of the game, I think they handed the ball off a couple times down 1 score. Like
McDermott,
they
use the whole clock.
They sort of threaded this needle of making it look like they tried to score when they didn't. And then, of course, they punted. They didn't go on 4th down. So, like, I watched that and I was like, he very comfortably and casually made sure New England didn't get the first overall pick at the end of the game. Now, that narrative in and of itself, I don't believe. I think they went out and played football and probably tried to win, but once they were down late, he went, I'm not trying to win this thing, right? So, with respect to the coaching, I echo John's sentiment there. I couldn't be more excited for Vrabel to be back in the league. Those are the guys that I want. Dan Campbell fits the bill, John, for like a, quote, football guy, and he's a fucking psycho. He is a psycho. Yeah. The things I'm watching him do, and I love these Lions. I really do, and I think a lot of people do. People are saying things online like Dan Campbell, they wish they were playing with Dan Campbell. Other players are hinting that they wish they were on the team. People are saying they wish he was their dad instead of their actual fathers. And I get it. He's so motivating. He's so inspiring. His play calling cost them the NFC Championship last year. That game against the Vikings was a fucking statement game from the Lions. They looked unbelievable. But in key moments, he did some things and turned the ball over 2 separate times. And I'm not talking about like, Dan's walking out there with this big set of nuts going on 4th and 10. I'm talking about analytical scenarios where, you want a football guy making the right decision, but he's doing things that don't make sense, like throwing a bomb on 4th and 1 inch. It is 1 inch to gain, and he's throwing a bomb. He's always trying to trick you. But when you're always trying to trick someone, you start to become predictable. They drew the Vikings offside on 4th and 2 when if he had have kicked a field goal, he would have gone up 3 scores where the Vikings couldn't statistically win the game. It was impossible. Whereas if he turned it over on downs, the Vikings statistically could have still win the game. Now, I would hope that he wasn't snapping that football, but I think most people would think that he actually would have snapped that football. So I want the football guys in the league. I think Dan's nuts. I'm excited for Vrabel. The league needs a real coaching shakeup. And I think, the whole young kid coming in with some new analytical type thing has a place in the league. But at the end of the day, you need someone in charge that understands the game beyond the analytics, because sometimes these analytics are not factoring in the situation and the intensity of the situation. That's kind of my stance.
Yeah, there's some intangibles there that need to be factored in, and I'm glad you brought up Dan Campbell, because I think he's one of those guys who creates intangibles, perhaps, and certainly knows how to feel them while he's out there. I think because you brought up that game, I think a guy like Dan Campbell, with his kind of wild man mentality, is able to rope other coaches into playing his wild kind of style game, which is we watched it last night. Kevin O'Connell going for it on 4th down and 4th and 5 or whatever it was, 4th and 3. It's like, kick your freaking field goal and take the points and let's move on. Especially in the first half there, where it was a tight game, it was a close game. But no, now he's going for it, because I think he's thinking, because Dan's going to go for it, when he's put in this situation. And it becomes like this weird sort of game of chicken, I guess, in some ways. And anyway, that was a bit frustrating for me to kind of go out there and see, because I think that, I would have liked to seen my guy keep his head. perhaps a little bit more than
Yeah,
was done.
on that note, though, Shane, I think so. We've got a full season, regular season behind us of the NFL, and obviously at the start of the season, there was just one thing everyone was talking about: the new dynamic kickoff, right?
Yes.
And a big reason for these turnovers is something we touched on: is leaving your opponent at the 3, 4, 5, or 6,
Yeah.
instead of them getting it out to the 30 on a failed attempt. Now, in 2020, in last season, not this season, there's 4 kickback touchdowns. I'm just trying to think in my head. I don't have the answer. I know I've seen 2. I know I've seen 2. So, like, are there more kick returns, and is there more scoring created from it? I know there's more scoring created from teams starting with better field position. We've seen countless examples of where someone just scored, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, they're in range. And it's like one play, and it's not a bomb. They started the drive at the 35 or the 30, and they quickly got a 15, 20-yard play, and bang, maybe a penalty tacked on at the end. And it's like, oh my God, they're downfield really quickly. So I think the coaching discussion also brings up that whole rule discussion with the season behind us, and go, what was the upside? What was the benefit? What role is that playing in coaches' decisions on some of these fourth down, situations? And is there a world where we go back to an extent to what we had? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I agree. I thought Kevin O'Connell was baited into trying to be Dan Campbell, and that reminds me of politics, where, like, you have someone pretending to be the leader of the other party, knowing that they're just going to lose. They're a different version of that same person. And it reminded me of it. And I think Kevin O'Connell got, like, coach of the year. I think he got completely out coached in that game, because it was a tight game heading into halftime. And then whenever you see a team blow out their opponent and it isn't on a splash play or a fluke, usually that's going to be coaching adjustments that were made.
Yeah. And that's definitely, I think, what we saw. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for coaching. Why don't we get into the gridiron grind? And we'll kick it off with the college football playoffs, because we're now heading into the semifinal. Is that right? Semifinal?
Yeah. And I love how Shane doesn't fully. Shane's an NFL guy. He's like, I don't fully know.
What are we doing
with
What
college football?
are we doing here? That's why I turn it over to you guys. I know you guys know what you're doing. I know that my future on Georgia lost. That's about all I know. I was like, yes. Oh, these guys are out. They got it handed to them too, right? By Notre Dame.
Well, the advanced, like, if you look at the second order box score, they actually had a plus win probability. So, like, if they played that same game with the same stats 100 times, they probably win like 65.
Really?
Times.
There's a key moment in the game where Kirby Smart was outsmarted straight up.
Yeah,
like straight up.
It was bad.
He was outsmarted. It cost them the game.
Well, did you know I didn't realize, so like the thing with his dad, because his dad passed away like that next day, and he had, from complications of a surgery where he had fallen on New Year's Eve and broke his hip, and then he had surgery the next day. And I think he was in intensive care because of complications from the surgery. I think Kirby knew that day that he probably wasn't going to make it.
Wow.
So I definitely wouldn't have thought about betting Georgia, or I would have tried to probably hedge my ticket or something if I had known that situation, but it wasn't public, so nobody knew that. So, like, I think clearly after knowing that in retrospect and going back and thinking about that game, I think it was clear his mind was somewhere else.
There was a couple times during the game too where he was like on the sideline, and I could see what he was complaining to the officials about, and I was looking at it going like, Kirby, you're not right. Like he got out coached, which it makes sense in this spot. But yeah, I mean, Georgia multiple times had like control of the situation in the game and was outgaining and outplaying, and they just fucked it up over and over and over again. But that wasn't even the real upset. The real upset was losing the Sun Devils from the rest of the tournament, because they looked fucking electric in that fourth quarter. The game was just so much fun. It was finally awesome to watch, like a competitive college football game in these playoffs, because that was definitely the best of all of them. 4th and 13, and they're in the next round, and they picked on that same safety twice, the poor kid. But yeah, that was electric. Anyways, John, we got Notre Dame as a favorite to Penn State, -2.5. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so interesting on both of these games. The line opened exactly what I make it, and then it moved toward the favorite. So kind of just tells you like where the public money's like where the money is coming in on these games. So I make it -1.5 for Notre Dame. I actually think the Penn State offense with their run game has probably the biggest matchup advantage in this game, just in terms of you can really run on Notre Dame, but Georgia hasn't really. Their offensive line was kind of bullied in that game by the Notre Dame front, and that's just been a weak spot for them all year. They haven't had the depth, and they've lost a couple guys on that offensive line, whereas Penn State is basically fully healthy in that area. So I actually think they have kind of like when I look at the matchup, that's really the only big time advantage that I see there. Otherwise, I think these two teams are very close, but I think it's going to be a very conservative game. I think it's probably a good under game. I think there's going to be a lot of moving clock. Notre Dame would rather have Riley Leonard run than throw. We saw that. I think he only completed like 8 passes in that Georgia game or something. I mean, they gained less. I think they only gained like 160 yards or something in that Georgia game.
They also weren't ready for the run.
Muted.
You got to assume Penn State's going to have seen how he gashed Georgia on it. You'd be in a situation where you're like, okay, Georgia's getting the ball back, and they wouldn't even throw the football. You'd take off running and pick it up.
Yeah, and you can run on Georgia. It's not the same Georgia defense from years past. You know, in all of these SEC teams, they don't have the same. That actually Texas, ironically, they're the only one left. They're the one that actually holds up like an old school SEC team. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like the matchup for Penn State, but I really like the under a lot in this game. It's kind of low, but
I'm going to come out and say that Penn State should be able to just fucking thump Notre Dame. That's my opinion, but again, I don't give a shit about pregame betting. So I'm looking forward to that. I'd say I'm looking forward to both games because lopsided games are sort of hated from the audience in college football, but we love lopsided games. And when you have a game that's more or less a pick'em, you don't care who's dominating. You really don't.
Yeah. John, bringing up the total there, I just want to mention that it opened at 47 and that line has moved to 45.5. So, John, it's moving. It's moving downward, probably because guys like you are out there betting it.
John's probably already got 47. So when you're listening to this and you're sitting there getting 44.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, nobody cares about your CLV. So I would still take 45.
There you go.
I like 45.
Right. There you go. Okay. So Ohio State, John, I thought they opened at 6.5. They're down to 6 now. Is that wrong?
They opened at 4.5 and within like a day it was up to 6.5, and then that's where the resistance came in. That they'll never give a 7. I don't think. I mean, they would get too much money on that 7, and it'd just be too easy to get that back door. So I think I 4.5 to 5 I think is the right line. Ohio State looks head and shoulders above all these other teams left, right? I mean, of anyone in the playoff, they've looked the absolute best because they've dominated on both sides of the ball consistently throughout both games that they've played. I mean, it's not even close, but
they're the favorite to win it all big time now. I think the public thinks they're unbeatable.
That was a thrashing they
laid it's them in the field. So yeah, I mean, I would rather this isn't a game I would bet pregame, but because if Texas is the side I like, I would rather just see if I could get a 7.5, just let the game start and then let Ohio State get a first down and all of a sudden you get a 7.5. It's like when you get those lines, the lines move so fast in college. So, but from a matchup standpoint, I think the defenses actually have an advantage in this game. But the total is not high enough for me to want to take it under though, with how explosive Ohio State is specifically.
Yeah. I mean, they two really good games this week, so I'm excited for them. Okay.
Sorry, Quinn Ewers' revenge game out there for people who forget about that Quinn Ewers was lost his job to CJ Stroud a couple years ago.
Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff. Okay, over to the NFL. If you're going to lose a teaser, best to go 0-2, which is what I did this past week. I'll just do a run through from the teaser standpoint really quickly. So games that make sense, I'm not betting these. You can get Houston up to plus 8.5. I think Baltimore on a 10-point teaser probably makes a lot of sense. There are books that have the Bills at 8.5. So getting them down to 2.5 on a 6 is super appealing. You can get the Packers up to plus 10.5 right now. That makes a lot of sense. I think the Commandos side on the plus, getting them through 8.5 and up to 9 or 9.5 is good. And then if you can get 1.5 on the Rams, you can get them up to 7.5. There's no way I am betting that combination of games. I hate Houston. I think they're a terrible playoff football team. I'm not saying they won't win or cover. I just haven't liked what I've seen from them. I think Baltimore is probably the highest probability team of a blowout in the NFL right now. So I wouldn't touch minus 10, but that 10 point down teaser probably makes a lot of sense. I love the Bills at 2.5. That would definitely be my favorite of the week. I want to get the Commandos, but as we're recording this, a lot of it is +3 at even or plus money. So I would want to see that get to 3.5 or 4 and have it get a little bit juicy to put on a teaser. And then finally, I do like the Rams, but I really would like 8.5. I would pull the trigger for 7.5. So basically, I haven't bet my teaser yet. I'm waiting and hoping that I'm going to be able to get a couple of those pluses. But the 3 that I like are the Rams, Commandos, and the Bills. I would assume I'm only going to do 2 of the games because I don't think the lines are going to match up the way I want them to at the same time. But we shall see. John, what do you like this weekend for any of these playoff games?
Yeah, I think the numbers on particularly the Ravens and the Bills are too high. I don't think any of these teams should really be more than a touchdown favorite this year. Like in these spots, I think what you're seeing is kind of what you talked about with the teaser. The books are afraid of having those numbers at 7.5, 8.5 because they know they would get a ton of lopsided action on teasers on those favorites. So a lot of times, I don't know that people really are aware of this maybe, but a lot of times with these favorites that are more than a touchdown favorite, a lot of times the line is actually made considering teasers. Like, they just don't want to give themselves the exposure on that teaser. So I think that's why that Ravens number is so high, because that's also a divisional game, and then you have the greatest underdog coach of all time and Tomlin getting 10 points on some books right now. I can see the number keep going because I just think the public's going to hammer the Ravens. They're going to hammer them in teasers. So that's a really interesting one. I'll definitely have to have some action on the Steelers for sure. I kind of like the Bucks. I was actually hoping that line would go down because I know the public really likes the Commanders. The Bucks almost didn't make the playoffs, so I'm kind of hoping I can get normal juice on a 3 or like -110 on 3 flat, or maybe like -120, -125 on -2.5. I think that line should be closer to 4.5. The other lines out there kind of make sense to me. That Chargers Texans line makes sense. I can't get there on like a -3 for the Chargers, but 2.5 I kind of like, even though I don't know that there's much value on the number. I just think that Texans team has so many bad vibes, and they've really kind of torpedoed here towards the end. And then finally that Vikings line, I think that opened 2.5, and you've seen that come down real quick, and I think that game is going to close at like a pick. If I made that line, I would make it Vikings -115 on the money line. I think people are probably going to be pretty surprised by that. And I think that's a line that's going to have a lot of reverse line movement, where there's a lot of professional money coming in on the Rams, while the public's hitting the Vikings, wondering how they're only a pick. The narrative about, it's probably going to be a home game for Minnesota and like all that kind of stuff. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be true in the playoffs. For that game, I think people actually make the trip to support the Rams and brave the LA traffic, but I like the Rams in that game. And you can still get the Rams at like a massive number to win the Super Bowl, which I like.
Oh, I'm in on that, John. There's no way I was passing up those odds.
It's pretty nuts of a team hosting a playoff game in the first round whose their coach and quarterback have won a Super Bowl together in recent history. Just a pretty crazy number on them.
But people talk about the Bengals and the run they're on. The Rams are on an incredible run. Yeah. The Rams closed out the season as elite as any team in the NFL and not getting the attention.
Yeah, I mean, they beat the Bills, a few weeks ago. Like they've beaten good teams, and they've looked good doing it. So that to me, that's the biggest value on the board. Doesn't mean it's not good. Doesn't mean it's going to win, but you have to have some money on that.
The Bills who beat the Detroit Lions, the Bills that beat the Kansas City Chiefs. the Rams handled them very well. The Rams can beat anybody. The Eagles are amazing. The Lions are amazing. The Vikings looked like shit last night, but they have been amazing. Give me the Rams at 40-1. Fuck yeah. Like I'm pumped for that bet. And of course, every year we talk about something like this, and then we're going to be sitting here going, "Oh, the Vikings got through."
Yeah,
Right?
they just get
Shane's
blown
gonna
out
be
in the
like, "I
first
told you
round,
so, guys."
I probably though, like, you guys are bringing it up, and I can't disagree. Like the Rams are like, I had Puka and Kyron on one of my main fantasy teams all season long, and I had them last season as well. I kept them as keepers this year around because I love that offense. I think that offense is really strong, and I did not want the Vikings to be going to play the Rams this upcoming weekend. And I'm very concerned for my team heading out there, because I think you guys are absolutely right. I think that Rams team is dangerous. And when we talk about wide receivers in the league, Justin Jefferson, of course, always comes up as a top name. Jamar Chase always coming up as a top name. And there's a few others out there. I don't think Puka Nacua comes out as much in the conversation as I think he needs to. The guy is big. He's strong. He's fast. He's a whole package of wide receiver that you just want on your team. And he's durable.
Yeah.
I think he's a special player. And I think he's an absolute superstar. And then of course you have Cooper Kupp out there who was that guy just a few years ago and can probably still pull it out. And then you talk about McVay and Stafford having already been there and won it. It really is. They're a full package team, and I'm very concerned of my Vikings heading out there.
So have you bet the future?
I think I'm gonna. I haven't yet, but I think I'm going to.
It's a great emotional hedge.
Yeah, it is an emotional hedge. That's what it is. So
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to, especially if the number, like, I haven't looked, but is that 40-1 number still out there? It's probably not
John,
that high.
I haven't looked today, but with the new lineups being released, but I know there's like 36s out there and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, if anything over 30, I think I'm gonna probably have to
45-1.
Oh my God.
On a book out there.
Wow,
You can still get
45.
That's better than
It's
the
gone-
line you got.
That's
John.
insane.
I know. It's better than the line I got before we even knew they were going to make the playoffs. I don't understand it. I guess it's just maybe drawing the Vikings in the first round or something. I don't know. But even the path, assume everything goes chalk, they get to play in a dome again. McVay gets to play against Goff again. There's familiarity, there's a matchup kind of advantage there, not having to go outdoors. I think it's just a good path for him. It's the odds are pretty insane. So.
Yeah, totally. And I'm just realizing as we're talking about this stuff, Shane, the graphic that you have up has the Commandos playing the Rams and the Vikings are playing the Bucs.
How did that happen? This is Bleacher Report here too. We got to make a little adjustment there.
Source from like a guy on Twitter who was like super hopeful about.
You would think that was the case, but this is Bleacher Report. Yeah, I don't know. They got it a little screwed up
funny.
here. But I tried to do something here to give everybody a visual representation. Hopefully, everybody's just listening and they're not actually paying that much.
No, you know what?
attention to the visual
I like it. Sometimes there's kind of a notion in betting that if you're an expert of the sport or like you grew up playing the sport, that it could actually be a detriment or a handicap to you when you go in betting, and that you'd be better off like almost like throwing darts at a board and deciding that way as opposed to putting your knowledge in, because knowledge has nothing to do. I shouldn't say it has nothing to do. Knowledge has nothing to do with like beating the spread, right? There's so much more that goes into that kind of stuff. So, putting up a bad graphic might actually lead to success for sports bettors, because then the information that they operated with is going to provide a little bit more chaos in your decisions. So anyways, that Rams number is great.
Yeah. A couple other things I just want to pick up on quickly, John. I think you're absolutely right to be looking at the Steelers, especially like if you can get a crazy teaser spread on them, a divisional game. I mean, these teams know each other and the spread is huge already. I don't know that's I think that spread's a little nuts, but I think you're right that as the week goes on, the public's probably just going to be hammering the Ravens, right? And they're just going to be looking at that Ravens side all week. And I'm thinking like, yeah, I think there might be something there with the Steelers, at least to keep the game close, maybe not win, but keep it within a one-score game. I mean, those teams,
they don't even need to cover the spread.
The spread, yeah. But that's what I'm saying is I think they can keep it a one-score game. I think they can keep it a field goal game potentially. That could be a 2017 walk-off field goal for the win, either side. And
we have seen Lamar Jackson MVP get the bye, get that home game after the bye, and then get upset in the playoffs. So
it
definitely
happens.
division games are where you can see probably a real high probability of upsets happening.
And I know that Pace, you like the Bills there, but I just that Denver team seems feisty.
I don't like the Bills spread. I don't like the Bills spread.
Right.
If I can get 2.5 on a teaser for the Bills, which you can right now, Bodog 365, they both have 8.5, and it is the juicier side. So there's value on that 2.5 on a teaser right now. I just don't like what I can put it with. I really like that Bills at 2.5. I think the Bills come out and take care of business. Yeah. They know what they're doing in the playoffs.
But
Sean Payton, the timeout holder, he is a good coach. We know that.
Oh,
but my God, is he a fucked up dude with what he's doing on the field? Bo Nix is looking at him going, call the timeout. And Sean Payton tells him to hurry up. They end up not even using it. Like, he clocked the ball. Like, it's just, the guy is so messed up in the head sometimes. But anyways, guys, separately of football, I think it's important because it's 2025 here now, our first episode of 2025. A lot of our, gridiron stuff on the show has been like, okay, we're talking about college football. We're talking about NFL. And I think it's really good for people to know that from a betting standpoint, there's no question that football sort of is it's almost like the gravitational pull or what controls the ecosystem of the betting landscape. And it's for good reason. People just love the sport. There's a reason why it's so profitable, so popular. The list goes on. And I absolutely love it. From an ROI standpoint, it's been a great season. There's no question about it. And, not without its ups and downs. But what's to come this time of year from a betting standpoint when we look beyond football is the most profitable and most exciting time of year from an ROI standpoint. Whether it's college basketball, Shane, whether it's women's college basketball.
I'm already getting in on the women's and watching the men's as well. I'm playing both already, and I'm excited for it, absolutely. And it's been fun.
And we had a great little week there betting on college hoops this last week, and I kind of view this as the start of the season because this is when teams are now competing for starting to get a little bit more of a picture of where they're going to stand in their conference tournaments.
And we get those conference games. Like those conference games are in abundance now, whereas before they really weren't, and we're really getting those conference games.
Yeah, and one thing that's nice, we talked about this last year, is some of those conferences, they do become their own league with their own tendencies. And that's always something that's really nice to keep an eye on. So, sometimes we'll talk about, like they don't do this in European hockey, but they do it in the NHL or vice versa. You get that a little bit with like these conferences in college basketball. There's so many teams, obviously way more than college football, where, you go, this league's, notorious for playing slow or whatever the case may be, right? Or running it up on their opponent, being disrespectful to them, not dribbling the ball out. The list goes on and on. And then from a hockey standpoint, we're rocking and rolling. Had a really big week of hockey, and our ROI is really clicking on the season here with the NHL. Had to obviously make some adjustments with some of these new tendencies this year, but we kind of hit our stride as we head into the second half of the NHL season and into the playoffs. And then there's no debate with the NBA. Like, what's to come with the NBA is some of the most exciting months in profit of the entire year, especially as we head into the playoffs. So on top of that, it's tennis season, right? So we turn the page into the summer a little bit earlier with tennis. I think the summer starts right or is ending in Australia to kick off the major tennis season. But a lot of fun and a lot of profit to be had. And again, from an ROI standpoint, a lot of our ROIs on these sports are actually higher than football, but it just doesn't have the same level of betting hype. So I'm really excited for the rest of the year, the rest of the sports seasons, but the start of 2025, because I think we've got some really good momentum inside of the group at inplayLIVE.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love that you touched on all that. I really only start looking at hockey and joining you guys on hockey kind of now-ish and through the rest of the season. And not much of a priority towards the end of the calendar year for me. And you talk about ROI being higher. A lot of that is because, these are, when you talk about the NFL, it's the most efficient market out there. Right, it's getting the most action. Those lines are always going to be somewhat sharper. Whereas now it's a great opportunity to kind of dial into some of these less efficient markets, perhaps less bet markets that we're able to take advantage of as sharp bettors out there. So it's a great time of year, absolutely, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And we'll be talking more about some of these other sports and some of these other leagues here on the podcast as the year goes on and the seasons progress. And I'm looking forward to that as well. All right, guys, anything else before we say goodbye? That's it. All right, fellas, till next week. Keep eating those bucks. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join in Play Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.